Let's start with Mr. Shetty.
Hi, thank you for having me. The first thing I would suggest is the pandemic has highlighted that we now value different things. We value the idea of more time and flexibility. We value, obviously, our safety and our mental health. And I think these feel like they are somewhat permanent changes, both in the workplace and in our society. And so as organizations think about returning to a workplace, thinking about hybrid work, thinking about how they relocate work across different countries, these aspects of what was spoken about before, of how you separate the synchronous work that needs to be and has been done together for generations, whether that's in a physical workplace or remote, that's going to get challenged. And it has to be challenged so that we're not all working the large number of hours we have been working in many industries, especially those industries that can work from home. So from our perspective and our research, these factors require a different way to lead, and the whole focus on how you drive inclusive leadership, which is all of the basics of management on being vulnerable, being a great coach, listening, encouraging your team members to learn, and investing in yourself. But the latest one that from our perspective is leaders now have to be comfortable with re-architecting the work to really differentiate between synchronous and asynchronous. And we think that will be a big challenge in a hybrid environment. Not impossible, but a big challenge.
Okay, next one is Professor Stansberry. What is your comment?
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
so I echo, really want to build on what Mr. Sethi spoke about in terms of inclusive environments. I think one of the most exciting possibilities that firms have now is to really involve from the bottom up teams in redesigning how they work and deciding how they allocate their time and how they do their working practices. And one of the pieces of academic research that informs me in this is research by my colleague Erin Kelly at MIT, who implemented a major work restructuring with a Fortune 500 company in the US, where essentially they let individual teams, got them to run a series of workshops together where all team members had equal say in how they want to do their work, how they want to balance their time between physical and remote work, how they want to balance their time during the day. And this restructuring program led to big increases in working from home. This was before the pandemic, so now this is obviously the norm for everyone, but pre-pandemic, big increases in people putting their day together more flexibly, maybe working in the evening rather than at lunchtime, big increase in focused offline time so that people aren't expected to be always on and always reachable, and they can actually work on deep focus type projects, and being more deliberate about which meetings are important and having the expectation that people can actually protect their time and say no to meetings that they don't have to be at. And one of the exciting things about this program is there was a really substantial increase in job satisfaction, a big decrease in burnout, and a 40% reduction in turnover in this company in the units that implemented this change. And so I think building this flexibility from the bottom up with all the employees involved in deciding and having power and influence in deciding how you change has the potential to be good for both the employees and the company's bottom line.
Okay, thank you. How about Professor Zhang?
Hi, I want to echo what Anna just said, and also her colleague Erin is also my good friend. So I'm very familiar with this program. So I want to comment on how to build an inclusive working environment. So a lot of my research is about the struggles of working mothers during the pandemic. So I think one thing the companies want to make sure is to have equal policies that offer flexibilities across genders, across demographic groups. So just another thing I want to highlight is a lot of things that we learned during the pandemic may not necessarily apply to post-pandemic work. So for example, we have some research using data before the pandemic. So adjusting for a lot of issues, including selection to telecommuting, we find that actually when women working at home, they tend to work less hours on the work. However, the things changed if you look at the data during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, we actually find that working at home actually allows women to work longer hours compared to their counterparts who cannot work from home. So this is really interesting. So what happened? So apparently we adjusted for election. So one possibility is that while maybe men and women will react differently in front of a disaster. So consider a pandemic is some kind of disaster, and then in an emergent situation, then people may try to collaborate, may try to make sure things will work. However, post-pandemic, the situation I could imagine will be more similar to what we see before the pandemic, where everybody will offer the option to work from home, but the usage of this option may not be equal across men and women. So from data from before the pandemic, we see that when both men and women are offered the opportunity to work from home, women with young children are more likely to pick up this option. And then what ends up is that there has been stigmatizing attached to working mothers because they view working from home is more like an option for them to opt out the work. So I think a lot of things that companies and employers should just think about, particularly towards building inclusive working environment across multiple dimensions.
Thank you. Now it's turn to Mr. Darren Murph. Sir, it's your time.
Thanks all for joining today, and these panelists have shared some incredible insights already. I want to start by saying that this is the biggest opportunity in a generation to completely reevaluate the integration of work and life, and where our identities come from and how much of that should be associated with work. We've talked a lot about inclusivity, but this is a really big deal. For a long time, those who needed the flexibility the most, working parents, elder caregivers, military spouses, nomads, and introverts, they have been the most ostracized from great career progression because they weren't aligned with relocating to a major urban center for certain career paths. So they essentially had no options. And also, for those that did move into the office, there was this assumption that if you weren't the loudest voice in the room, you may have less influence. And in a remote environment, everyone essentially contributes in the same size font. And so for introverts and those who have had trouble speaking up in the past, this is a major, major opportunity for them. Good. We just published the remote work report for 2021. And we found some interesting data. This was research that was sponsored by GitLab. We found some interesting data that showed that people had a very positive outlook on the long-term implications of remote work, but were really struggling in the here and now with the day-to-day infrastructure and getting their work done. And so when you break that down, what it shows is that people can forecast living a better, more flexible life, recapturing that commute time and having the ability to do things during the day or in non-peak hours that matter to them. So they really look forward to that. But their organizations were lagging behind in supporting them and enabling them to live those lives. Many organizations are in phase 1 of remote adaptation, which I call skeuomorphism. They are essentially copying the office environment and then pasting it into the virtual environment, which is passable, but it doesn't take it